Hello and welcome to HFMA Talk, the podcast for NHS Finance. I'm Mark Orchard, Chief Financial Officer at Portsmouth Hospital's University NHS Trust. I'm really pleased to be hosting this series of HFMA Talk in Conversation With, where I get to indulge my curiosity about people and ask some of my current and former NHS colleagues about their backgrounds and what drives them. I'll be talking to a range of people in these podcasts, working across all sectors and geographies, and in this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Hardev Virdee, Group Chief Financial Officer at Barts Health, which is of course one of the largest healthcare groups across UK and indeed across Europe. Hardev, welcome. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm really excited to be here. I'm really pleased to be part of this podcast. Slightly nervous about what we're going to go into, but yeah, pleased to be here.
Well, listen, nothing to be nervous about. We're amongst friends. Thank you very much for taking the time out on what is, for us today, recording this Hardev, Friday afternoon after a busy week. So what have you been up to this week?
What have I been up to this week? Well, I think what I've noticed is we've had this real push to encourage people to take days off. So I think for the last 3 weeks, I've actually worked out I've been doing a 4-day week. And so I'm getting quite used to this. And with Easter coming up now, that's going to carry on. So I'm feeling quite continental in terms of a 4-day week. What it does mean is my days are actually a bit longer in the days I work in. But yeah, this week is the normal challenges you face on a daily basis. I've had some exciting discussions this week, not least one which I have at the end of each Friday, where I chair the London Finance Academy Board with a group of CFOs and regional directors of finance to talk about how we develop our staff, which is absolutely fundamental. So that's my passion. And we look forward to those discussions on a Friday morning. And it was pitched up against the planning guidance coming out. So I think people are more looking forward to the Academy Board discussion. I hope they were anyway. But it's a busy old week, and I'm sure it's going to carry on after Easter as well.
The London Finance Academy Board, that's quite a commitment. So tell me a bit more about that. Tell me a bit more about what you're doing in London.
Yeah. And I think I might, depending on the timing of this podcast, this might be an exclusive, but I'm now going to be chair of the National Finance Academy. Julian Kelly has set up a National Leadership Council, and there's 3 streams in there, one being the National Finance Academy. And he's asked me to chair that, which is an absolute privilege to be developing what we've been working on in London and doing that on a national basis. I think if I might just indulge a bit more in that question, if I may. So probably about 2 years ago, I met with the regional director of finance in London, and he was having a one-to-one with each of the finance directors in London just to get to know them. I met him in a coffee shop, and I walked in, hadn't prepared anything. He said, I want to know a bit about you, etc. And he said, so tell me how you've got here. And I naively said, well, it was the district line, which I caught earlier, and it was a short walk to the coffee shop. And he clearly thought I was pulling his leg, but I was genuinely trying to answer his question. But he was more interested in my career. Anyway, we had a long discussion, and he was more interested in trying to get me to have a platform to really promote inclusion and diversity. And he felt that it was lacking in London in the leadership. And he then talked to me about being a role model, etc. And that didn't quite feel comfortable with me. I knew what a role model was, and I knew my experience people would see me as a role model, but at the time I was not in Barts. I was in another organisation, and so I knew bits of what it takes, but I thought, me, role model, up on stage talking about this kind of thing, I said you need someone who's slightly more experienced at that. But the next thing he's sort of thrusted me in the limelight and said, right, you're going to lead on diversity with Sandra Easton, and one of you is going to focus on ethnicity, one's going to focus on gender. Thankfully, I got the ethnicity one. I suspect I had a bit more to offer to that than the gender aspect. But it's more about the fact that we have these protected characteristics. And the issue was, how do we become more inclusive? That really resonated with me because it's something that I felt, well, I didn't know at the time, but I feel more strongly with each day that goes by that we've got to do more. And this was prior to what's been going on abroad, worldwide, in terms of inclusion. And I just felt trying to get that message across to people, it was really important. So myself and Sandra, we worked really hard on developing that agenda. We actually took we took ownership of those issues and said it's us as CFOs that need to respond. And one of the things we made clear was we cannot outsource that this is us. We've got to find the solutions as well. So we, as you know, we went around the country promoting the work that we were doing. We developed a leadership program called Going Beyond, and that really got a lot of energy behind it and enthused a number of key people to get behind this. So much so that I'm sure this initiative will be rolled out nationally. But it's really important to us to tap into people that are passionate about this agenda. What's really positive is that there are a lot of senior leaders who are passionate about this, who can make change and will make change. And we're now making sure that we're giving those people all the right tools to do that across a wider basis. And so I feel really honoured to be able to now do this on a wider basis nationally. So I'm really excited about that, really looking forward to that. But like I said, there's a lot of work to be done on that.
So first of all, Cardiff, congratulations on that appointment. I think sincerely couldn't think of a better person to lead that. And when I heard that you were leading on that bit of the One NHS Finance future work streams, I couldn't be more pleased to see that you were out there leading that. And you really are a role model, I think, for all of us. And with that in mind, where do you look to for your role models? And as you were sort of progressing through the earlier stages of your career, who were the sort of people that you aspired to?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question that I don't think should be answered by just leaders. I think it's important for everyone to ask those questions. And I constantly have that discussion with whoever I'm having a one-to-one with, either on an informal basis or mentoring. I think it's really important to understand, do people have those role models in their lives? What does it mean for them? I reflected on this recently and talked about how when I started out as a young infant primary school pupil in Birmingham, in a school that was where nobody wanted to teach, there was this headmaster who was brought in, and he was brought in because he was the only one that could take up this challenge. From a very young age, he took me to one side and had those conversations that, if you really put your mind to it, you could do something. And, up until that point, I had never had that conversation. And it's only more recently I thought, well, actually, I did see him as a role model, because he was the only one at that time that actually believed that I could do something and achieve something. So that was really early on. And then as I went through my education system, I lacked that role model. I found it hard to really excel, but I managed to get through. And then when it came to the wider perspective of who inspired me, I got asked that question probably about 10 years ago. And I remember I did a presentation, and it was all about Dame Kelly Holmes.
Oh, wow.
I look back at that presentation, and it was all about her determination, her drive to actually succeed when others thought she was unable to do that. She was older than many of the other runners at that time. She had come back from many injuries, and she did exceptionally well. And actually, just in the last year, I read her autobiography about what drives her. And I hadn't really appreciated the full dimensions of this individual. So she talked quite extensively about her battles with mental health, the fact that she self-harmed, and her struggles with depression, and how she had to find her role models. When the chips were down, she would find it really hard to pick herself back up. But it was running that was her escape, and her determination to prove others wrong. And it's interesting because I noticed there was a theme when I was looking at the role models, particularly as I worked through the NHS, that I've tended to excel and do better under female chief execs.
Really?
And I don't know if that's a correlation there. I find it interesting, the fact that I think I was working out that over my career in the NHS, about 10 chief executives, 8 have been women, and I've tended to, work my way and develop better under that leadership, and they've all been inspirational, and I've always held them in high regard as role models. So I've worked with some really interesting people who have helped inspire me and help develop my leadership style and how to set goals and stretch myself. I also find, again, an interesting dimension, which I haven't really managed to work all my way through why this is, but I prefer individual sports rather than team sports.
Sure.
And I don't know if that's something about seeing myself as a leader and putting that onus on myself of how to succeed and how to really beat the competition is my mindset. So I watch a lot of Formula One, and it's all based on, you may be in a team, but it's the individual person that the focus comes onto. And I watch probably less sort of team sports and focus on individual sporting events. So yeah, it's a strange set of role models, but I think there are some common themes in there in terms of, I find people who have succeeded against the odds and individuals who have managed to excel and trying to work out what is it that makes that difference for them and their mindsets.
So in all that then, if you're all about looking to individuals as opposed to teams for your inspiration and your role modeling and so on, I wonder whether is there someone that's had such a big impact or the biggest impact on the person that you've become, and if there was anyone that you'd single out along the way, whether in the workspace, whether it's somebody you look up to, or whether it's somebody in your personal life outside of work.
Yeah, so I probably try to live by the advice I give people and say, try not to focus on one individual, because you need to have your own style and your own approach. But I've certainly taken some good snippets from people. When I worked in the West Midlands, I used to work with Chief Exec Cynthia Bauer, and she was amazing, and she had a knack of just throwing me into the deep end and watching if I would swim. Whilst I wasn't a CFO, she gave me the sort of liberty and authority to really stretch my legs and test the ground in a safe environment. And I learned a lot from that. So she made the uncomfortable comfortable. Also, while I was working in the West Midlands, I worked in a PCT, and I had a chief exec at the time, Sophia Christie, who has done a lot of amazing work in the NHS and outside the NHS. What she brought to me was this angle around understanding my own personal values. So I knew I've always valued the fact that I want to promote equality, particularly when it comes to health and access to health care. She did some really interesting work in an area in Birmingham which was severely deprived, and I related that because it was similar to the area I grew up in, and she introduced some new schemes in there, and I remember she was being asked a series of questions by the board, I think it was, and someone asked, you've done all these initiatives, some multi-million pound investments. Which ones do you think has made the biggest difference? And what she said was the most successful initiative she thought was working in this community with a handful of women in a community and teaching them how to cook healthily. And she said the reason is because they didn't have those tools before of how they can support their families. They didn't have the financial resources to do that. But if you equip them with the skills, they learn very quickly that actually they can provide a more healthy set of options for their family, which they could live by and help prevent future health problems. And she said just teaching families and giving them the tools to that, and so they can then teach wider communities and get them involved in this, had a wider impact on health inequalities than any other initiative. And it kind of made me think about the way we should be engaging with communities, about listening to what communities actually want rather than saying this is what we believe is the right thing. And I think this concept around co-production is more about listening than actually trying to impose solutions. So that was a really valuable lesson for me. And for me, she was a big part of what set me up in terms of values and how to be lead teams and be. For me, she was an absolute role model in being successful as a chief exec, and just driving hard on her values to make a difference in the access of improving the access of healthcare for individuals, and that to me was really significant.
That's really powerful, and it's really powerful to hear that particular story, because of all the multi-millions that might have been spent at that point in time on interventions, I suspect that particular intervention was quite low-scale financial cost, but as you described, massive benefit derived from that, and it's very powerful in the way you tell that story. Okay, so listen, what I'd like to do now, if it's okay, is just go back a little step in terms of, you're at university in Manchester, yeah? You studied economics, you left university, you went into banking first, I understand, before you joined the NHS. And so just tell me that story. What were your sort of motivations at that point in your life, and how did you end up entering the NHS?
It's actually interesting. When I was at Manchester, it was during that whole Manchester phase. So the Hacienda, the Oasis, and Happy Mondays, and all of that. And well, I really got into all of that. So you can imagine what university life was like for me. And what I noticed is I tried to carry that on after university. So when I started working in banking, it wasn't a grand banking wheeling dealing job. It was a very much more mundane type of affair. But what it did highlight to me is a culture that was quite unique. So we would actually finish work on about Thursday lunchtime, and then from Thursday lunchtime we would be in the local pub in Birmingham, and we wouldn't leave until Friday morning. And then in the early hours of Friday, we would somehow stumble into work, and we wouldn't really do work. But by Friday lunchtime, we'd be back in the pub again. And it was that mentality and that culture. And I did it for so long.
Wow. How long were you doing that for?
A while.
Long enough to have an impact on your liver.
So anyway, we went through that phase. It was a bizarre phase, and then it was at the time where I wanted to actually carve out a proper career, and I had applied to go into the NHS graduate training scheme, and I got the offer in, and I was hugely pleased with that, because it was a highly regarded scheme, it still is. And I went to my banking employers and said, look, I've got this offer, I'm going to have to go. The line, and I may be slightly exaggerating, but it was, whatever they're offering will double that, and whatever benefits will double that as well. And it was this like lucrative career option. And so you come to this crossroads in life where you think to yourself, I could stay here, I could financially be better off, but I also know the values that go on in this industry and the culture. It's probably going to be a short career, and it probably take its toll on my health, probably more than anything else. So what is it I really want to do? And then I sat down and I thought about my values around, if I'm really serious about health inequalities, then the choice is pretty obvious. So that's when I made the decision to leave sort of the corporate world and come into the NHS. I haven't looked back since in terms of wanting to go back into that, but I clearly have worked closely with the private sector. I know the culture has changed quite a lot, and they have a lot to offer. And we've got a lot to offer. But yeah, I just think when you're faced with those crossroads, I always advise people to look at what you stand for and your values. And it's not about what you want right here and now. It's going to be, what legacy are you going to leave behind you? And for me, it was about making a difference in terms of people's lives and access to healthcare.
And Hardev, anyone that knows you, okay, knows that you are a man of strong values. And therefore, I'm not surprised to hear you tell that particular part of your career journey in that way. I'm probably more interested, you ended up in banking after university, really. How much of that didn't sound like it was planned in any way at that stage, but obviously you reached this crossroads. What were you thinking when you were going through your sort of school and university? What were your sort of career plans at that point, or did you not have anything clearly mapped out for yourself?
At school, and I didn't know. I had an older brother who went into pharmacy. My father worked in construction. Without sounding slightly stereotypical, he valued people working in the medical field and saw pharmacy as something that to be proud of. The A-level stage, I began to get more of inkling into sort of finance, economics, and the business side of the world, and I thought that interested me, but I was more also interested in the impact on people's lives and what that meant. When I decided to go into more finance orientated and accountancy as a qualification, my father's response was somewhat lukewarm, shall we say. He did this strange thing where he looked at my hands, and my father's hands are huge, made for construction. And he said, you've got such smooth hands, which are just right for accountancy.
Was that a compliment or not?
I don't know. I think he's always saw me as someone who had a pen in his hand rather than a shovel or anything else. I was quite comfortable with that choice of moving into finance and into healthcare. What was interesting is I bumped into somebody about a year and a half ago, and I hadn't met them for a number of years. And they said, "Oh, I recall when you were on the training scheme, you said at that time that this was in my first year of going onto the training scheme, that you were going to be a finance director, and that was it. I had this single vision, and I was quite set on that." Now, I don't remember that, but I can probably see myself being quite single-minded in that sense, because I thought if I'm on the graduate scheme, the reason I'm on that is to be a finance director. That was the thing that sold it to me. I was geared up to channel my energy into doing that. So I think there was something about wanting to work in business, but wanting to be a leader and wanting to influence people's lives. And I saw the finance director as taking that piece.
I wonder if there's something about your style and approach, Hardev, that has most stood you in good stead throughout your career. Is it that sort of single-minded focus?
I know that people have an impression that I'm quite steely. I have an ambition and go for it, and that is true. But I think there's if you peel that away, and I do this with colleagues, it's trying to understand actually what's driving that. Why are you feel that you're so driven? And I do think part of it is I recognise where I've come from, and I probably have a fear about going back to that more than anything else, of not wanting to go into a life where, as a very young person, when I was at school, you either got taken away in a body bag or in the back of a police van. And when I left school, they closed the school down because it was officially the worst school in the country. Yeah, to give you an idea, in my GCSE maths lessons in my final year, I had 14 different maths teachers. And I think that's driven me, that I've seen what my options were at a very young age. And I strongly believe you've got to help shape your future and take advantage of all these opportunities. And so I probably see opportunities differently and are keen to take them, because I know that if I don't, then other doors which aren't as successful can open. And it's a short path to go back to a life that really is quite a difficult life. So that's been a key focus for me, is moving away from that and trying to be as successful as I can in what I can do and my own ability, and realizing that potential, which is what I always ask people to do. If I can help people really realize their potential, then I know I'm doing the right things. I haven't always been that. I wouldn't call it driven. It's more about recognizing where I've come from and trying to make a difference to that life.
Wow. And recognizing where you come from is so important, isn't it? Hardev, I wonder, clearly you're a man of values. Hearing you talk there about your fear of not going back was so powerful. But I wonder how your approach and motivation has changed over the course of your career, and over the course of your life, in fact, because just hearing you talk, hearing of your experiences, well, you're in a slightly different place now than you were then, and I'm kind of wondering how that's evolved for you, and whether actually your values have evolved over that period.
Yeah, if I can, Mark, I just want to start by asking you a question on that bit, actually. You've got a sort of similar background as well. And when we talk about where we've come from, you've come from South Wales. You get a hint of that in your accent. Has your a strange question, but has your accent changed significantly from when you were at school? And if it has, was that a conscious effort?
It's interesting because I definitely nothing conscious in there. Absolutely not. And I tell you now, when I'm driving home tonight, if I ring my father or somebody in Wales, or one of my friends or member of the family, the full sort of Welsh accent and everything else comes straight through. It's funny, isn't it? Since I've lived down on the south coast for the last probably 20 years or so, and I suppose, I'm not sure why actually. It's not been a conscious thing. It's just an unconscious thing. But every now and again, somebody asks me where I come from, and then when I say that I'm from Wales, they recognise a twang somewhere, but it's not as prominent as it probably once was.
But that's really fascinating as well. The reason for asking that question is in the sort of evolvement of values and me as a person. I've realised talking to other colleagues that I'm not alone in this. When I was working in Birmingham and growing up in Birmingham, as I got my opportunity to work in London, I consciously made several changes.
Really?
Yeah. And, I changed my accent.
Wow.
I changed my name. My name was abbreviated before, so I wanted people to just recognize my name for who I am. I changed my outlook, the way I did lots of things, even the way I was able to walk into a room and answer people, how I responded, my attitude, my posture, you name it. I took that time of moving from Birmingham to London to create what I call the new person.
Wow.
Because in my head, I thought if I carry on with this person, I won't get to where I want to get to. And I felt I needed to fit in. And I felt I needed to do that, make those changes in order to progress.
That's a really brave thing to admit, really, isn't it? Especially on a podcast such as this, Hardev. So tell me a bit more about that, because other people listening to this podcast may resonate with some of that or may not. But it's really interesting that you feel you're able to sort of share that with us.
Yeah, and the reason for sharing it is several fronts. One is I know that there are many people out there who have gone through similar experiences, and I think we need to invite those conversations and allow people to, as we call it, bring themselves to work and be who they are. But equally, I'm quite happy to talk to you about this, because I know that you will now recognize that actually I need to be able to recognize people's names. I need to recognize people's accents, and that's part of the whole inclusion agenda. Yeah. So, you are an ally in that sense to help recognize that, because if I don't talk about it, if I don't bring that to the front, then this will continue where people feel the need to be somebody that they're not normally in order to be accepted. And actually, if we are able to bring ourselves to work, then I think that opens up a whole wide range of opportunities for people who previously we haven't been given those opportunities to, whether we call it unconscious bias or the fact that people haven't been strong enough to come forward. I just think there's a lot of opportunity of people out there that we haven't tapped into, based on people not being able to bring themselves to the work environment and actually reflect who they really are.
Can I fast forward now to your current role as Group CFO for Barts? How are you able to use your role and your portfolio and your team and your organisation to drive some of your values and your aspirations for the communities that you serve in?
Yeah, there's been lots of interesting things. Certainly in the last 12 months, there's been some remarkable events around the pandemic. A lot of this was captured by the BBC, but also behind the scenes, we created the largest critical care unit in the country in the space of 6 weeks. And that was a tremendous effort by everyone involved, including the actual contractors who came in and worked throughout the night to build this new unit. And it helped Northeast London, it helped save lives, and it was just an incredible achievement. And then throughout that, I was seeing pieces of work and individuals doing things well beyond their roles and responsibilities. And this is something that's happened across the NHS. So it was a real privilege to be part of Barts during the last 12 months. And while it's been a very strange induction for me, it's a place that I think now I've begun to understand more about what it means to work in a historic establishment, which goes back many, many years. In fact, one of our hospitals, St. Bartholomew's, is the oldest hospital in the country. So there's a lot of history. There's also a lot of amazing people working really hard and making incredible things happen using technology, innovation, but at the same time, really local things around reducing health inequalities, the day-to-day routine work that happens in any hospital. So for me, it's been a real eye-opener to see how such a large organisation manages to cope with the local and the national perspective. And I've enjoyed every minute of it.
So I'm kind of wondering now, where do you get your support from?
I try to have various outlets. So I also sit on a charity where I'm able to hear different scenarios and stories. It's healthcare related, but it's really helpful to be able to sound things out with people who are not solely finance related. And I've developed relationships through that where I can pick up the phone and talk to these individuals and just sound things out. So that's really good. Also, through the London Finance Academy, I've tried to create a culture where we can lean on each other. So my fellow CFOs, we are able to just talk about these issues. And I did that this morning where I just said, can I just have a moment to talk about something that's really affecting me? We sounded it out and it was really, really helpful. I think I also I have a great family. I think I also get inspired by them. My daughter came home the other day and she was fuming, and I was wondering what was going on, and she explained to me that there's some building work going on by her school. I thought, is it a distraction? She said, well, they've got a sign up saying men at work. And she said, but surely there must be women at work as well. And she said, why can't women do that work? And I was like, that's a very good question. And, so I get inspiration from there as well. And then probably my final thing is I like to run and clear my head.
Oh, I didn't know this.
Yeah. It's one of those things where I've been doing it for a fair few years now, and I wish I started it earlier, actually, because I find it as a really positive release. I did do a marathon a couple of years ago. It was a year when it was the hottest marathon. Which was
that London?
Yeah, it was London, and it was just an absolute nightmare. But yeah, and what's interesting, there's actually quite a few CFOs who do running, all sorts of running. So I'm sure if we put our brains together, there'll be quite a group of running CFOs, and I'm sure it's to do with a release and an outlet. But again, it comes back to an individual thing. I'm much better at individual aspects than team sports. So yeah, I use that as a release. So I also try to set myself goals in terms of running of entering races or just runs or whatever, just to have something to aim for.
Wow, I didn't know you were a runner, and I'll have to have a look to see if you're on Strava. Are you on Strava?
No, I'm not. I'm also very not very social media friendly as well. It takes some for me to do that.
Yeah, you're in one of the biggest CFO roles in terms of the group you're responsible for. I'm wondering, what's the best thing about your current role?
It is like no other job that I've done. And the way I describe it is relentless, but in a good way. Yeah, on my first week at Barts, I had a sort of induction day, followed by a meeting with the region about the financials, followed by a meeting with Simon Stevens, followed by a meeting about a new project to build a new hospital, one of the first in the country, and then a bit about life sciences and how you're going to improve the quality of health across East London. And that's all in my first week. And it happens week after week where you're just thrown into all these amazing situations, and it is more than finance. And I always say that if ever you get the opportunity to be a CFO, make sure you do more than be a CFO. Do what drives you, what your passion is, what you stand for, what your value is. So if for me it's about developing people, then make it about developing people. And I think if you can do that, then whether you're at Barts or whether you're at any other organization, you can really make that role your own, really make sure you succeed and deliver on what really drives you.
I think that's great advice, isn't it? And actually, I always think as well that actually, do you know what? Being a CFO and being, an accountant and everything else that goes with that, being a board director, that's kind of your license to do all the other stuff. You know what I mean? So that's like your passport and your ticket to go off and do all the other great stuff. And I recognise a lot of that in my current and previous role as well, around some of the broader contribution that you're able to make. I'm going to do a bit of a quick fire round in a minute, but before we do that, I'm just wondering, is this something, Hardev, if you look back, is there one thing you would say to your younger self if you had chance?
Put that drink down for a start. Making sure you've got good people around you is really important for advice, for being role models. And don't be shy of asking people those questions. And the other bit about being ambitious is not a bad thing. And this is for men and women generally. I think this ambitious thing is don't get that confused between confidence and being aggressive. It's just about actually having a desire and a passion. And I think if I could find that passion early enough and harness it, then that would help shape my values pretty sooner. But I think if you can delve into that bit of what drives you, what's your passion, and have a connection with that piece. So, when people talk to me about you, Mark, they always say, yeah, he's got the energy, he's enthusiastic, and he's driven. And, that's you, that's your USP, that's what you stand for. And whether you like it or not, that's what people see about you. But if you want to change that, you've got to delve into what drives you and what's your passion. So there must be something to it, Mark, about what makes you so positive and energetic and enthusiastic. And I think if I could have spoken to you all those years ago, I think I would have had a bit more of that, which probably would have helped shape my career even more so. But just understanding your passion and your drivers early on is really, really important.
Listen, I absolutely recognise a bit about surrounding yourself with good people. One of my previous bosses, just at the time that I was stepping up to my first finance director role, which is in a primary care trust back a number of years ago, of course. One of the things that always stands with me is that individual said to me, in fact, I'll give him a name check. His name's Paul Sly. He said, surround yourself with people that are better than you. Don't just surround yourself with good people, surround yourself with people that are better than you. And I've always tried to do that. And I work with some amazing people, and I've got some amazing people in my team, and they push you, and I think that's fantastic. And so I've always tried to carry that forward and give that advice as well. So, quick fire round, if that's okay. So listen, I'm not going to ask you to explain any of these answers. You can make them as short or as long as you want, okay? So they're just going to give you I'm going to just throw a few things at you. So whatever comes into your mind, I guess, first of all. First one is, what would be your perfect weekend?
Perfect weekend. There'd have to be a run in there somewhere. I'm sure you appreciate
Really?
that,
Yeah.
Mark. And also in lockdown, one of them was this thing about garden centres, which has suddenly crept up on me. And I feel it's a sign of my age. If it wasn't for lockdown, I think being with friends, and again, probably a sign of age, is not too much loud music in the restaurant or bars, but just generally having friends, and particularly around, and spending really good time with them, and probably listening to a bit of 80s and a bit of rock music. It always goes down well with me.
What's your earliest life memory?
This sounds quite depressing, only because I had to talk about it recently. Some of you remember in Birmingham in the late 70s where there was the Birmingham riots, and that was about 100 yards from where I lived. I remember wanting to go out there and see it, but I could hear it from the bedroom. And I remember not being able to go out there and me thinking it was scary. Probably not the best example there, but as a child, I do remember that, and the fact that, knowing that this wasn't right.
And finally, what makes you most happy?
Lots of things make me most happy. I like, as I said, I like doing a run. I miss going to concerts. So I used to go see lots of rock bands in small venues and stuff, and I just love the thrill of that. And I used to really like going to Grand Prix and going abroad, seeing races, and that makes me very happy. And I do miss those as well. And I did say the other day, just spending time with the family, that always makes me happy. Generally, seeing other people also develop and prosper, finding out someone's just, got a promotion, got the first CFO role, or just succeeding. There's a quiet bit of happiness inside me that gets lit from knowing that.
You mentioned music a few times. So what sort of things are you listening to at the moment?
Yeah, so I listen to a fair bit of Kings of Leon. My daughter's trying to learn how to play White Stripes, which is doing great stuff. And
wow,
I try to convert my son into listening to Guns N' Roses, which is really fascinating. But it also ranges through to music such as Prince and some of the old stuff as well. And what's scary, Mark, is that I asked my daughter about Live Aid, and I said, there's some great bands on there and all that.
Oh, yeah.
I said, have you heard of Live Aid? And she said, yeah, we learnt about it at school. I went, oh, that's brilliant. I said, what did they say? She goes, I can't remember, but I know it was during our history lesson. So it's now deemed back in the archives of, along with Egyptian history, Elizabethan, there's now Live Aid. So, there we go. That's how old we are now.
Well, Hardev, I've learned so much about you. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
And thank you very much for to have that conversation with you as well, Mark. It's been enlightening, and I'm hoping that people have got something from this as well.
Thank you for choosing HFMA Talk in conversation with. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast to keep up to date with future episodes. And if there is anyone that you'd like me to have a conversation with next as part of this podcast series, then please do get in touch via policy@hfma.org.uk. But for now, goodbye.